But I think the biggest one is probably the experience of being in college and what it means to succeed in college is very, very different than um, what it looks like to study on your own in homeschooling. So it would be good to sort of have what's the proper way to communicate this? I think being okay. Henry mentioned this earlier, I'm pretty sure, but being okay with not, no, it was Jessica, being okay with not understanding everything 100% to a way that would satisfy you and basing your like expectations of what you're getting out of a course more on what your professor is expecting a student to get out of it. Because if you want to spend 100 hours studying this one specific thing that's really interesting to you, you can, but you're probably going to fall behind in the rest of the course. So you need to understand sort of, okay, I can spend this amount of time on this assignment and it's good enough and it'll do well and I should probably move on because I've got other things to worry about.
It sounds like having a more personalized environment was a really big part of all of your homeschooling experiences. I know that it's really important for me. I had the same experience when I was, doing microeconomics or something. If there's a topic that I really want to dive into, homeschooling has given me that opportunity to do that. But I'm sure it's not exactly the same with the college experience. Was there a way that you guys found to still foster curiosity and a love for learning despite these larger classroom sizes and more structured environments? Maybe Jessica, you can go ahead and start us off.
Yes, the thing that I found that really fulfilled that deep desire for learning was professors' office hours. And I was terrified of my professors at first. And like, you guys are brilliant. You have a PhD in your field. You are an expert in your field. But over the time in college, it was a reoccurring habit for me to just walk around like this one building that I spent all my time in and just pop into literally every single professor's office with super duper detailed questions for them about their field of study. Half of them, like, I'd never even had as my exact professor, but I just loved talking to them. So I think that was for me a super easy way to get an expert answer on something I was super interested in. And honestly, like, I'm so grateful for the relationships with those professors. A lot of times, a lot of my peers would look at their professors as like, wow, you are up on this pedestal and like you're unapproachable and I can't talk to you, I can't ask you questions. But I mean, I had some of the most interesting conversations about like Dostoevsky's philosophy with like my organic chemistry professor. And so many of them are very interdisciplinary themselves and have incredible knowledge and insight and truly do want to have conversations within their field of expertise and just conversations in general. So that was probably the primary way that I satisfied that desire for deeper conversation. And then beyond that, a lot of it was just genuinely conversations with friends as well, bringing up the really interesting philosophical debates, ethical debates, especially with the pre med crowd, was always a hit. And just being willing to ask the questions that I had, because I found that honestly, more people than not had an interesting answer and also wanted to discuss it.
It's kind of funny because don't really view college as something people have to do, but because I knew I wanted to be a doctor, I knew I needed to go to college. So I did try to choose classes and activities that interested me the most, but I also knew there were things that I would have to take no matter what in order to go the direction I wanted to go. And I've always loved science. I like creative things too, but I really like getting scientific answers to things and highly specific answers. And you cannot always get those. And something that I coached myself through in some of my science classes or my math classes is I reminded myself of the fact that everything is an approximation. Even in science, all the scientific facts that we have are not completely set in stone. So there isn't this finish line that you're going to reach with the information for any topic, probably. So I would kind of figuratively calm myself down a little bit that it's okay that I don't fully understand this because probably what the textbook is saying isn't fully what the situation is either. But all of these ideas are stepping stones for someone to find out more and get a better approximation in the future. And I can't do that all right now, but I can keep walking that path towards where I want to be later.
So kind of flagging your interests for later review when you had time. Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, it's the same thing comes up, but even more in an even more pressing way in medical school because we have way more information that we're supposed to be learning. And if I get hung up on I want to know exactly why this thing happens, I will not be able to study the other 2 hours of things. And that might be something that no one knows the answer to yet. And maybe someday I or one of my colleagues or one of my current professors might figure that out, but there's a time and a place for all of it.
So kind of just holding those questions for a later time. How did you feel like if you felt like if you felt like your professor could help answer that question, what did you guys do? Like if it wasn't something that it was immediately addressed, was immediately in the scope of what you're talking about, but you really want to know, because this happens all the time for me. What do you guys do? Like, do you just like research it later? Do you ask it anyways?
Ambush your professor in their office.
Okay.
Or
So it
after
sounds
lecture.
office hours are, it sounds like, vital for sustaining that curiosity. Do you feel like, I know a really common concern about homeschooling is our ability to socialize. And you touched on this, Sylvia, a little bit earlier. And I think what you said was it was a little bit overblown with collaboration and things like that. So I was wondering, in what ways do you think homeschooling has shaped your ability to collaborate inside and outside of the classroom? And how did that affect your college experience? Maybe Sebastian, you can start us off.
I absolutely can. So, what I think was really interesting to me about socialization first in college is that a lot of the expectations about what socialization in college is going to be isn't always necessarily true. And homeschooling is a very similar in that regard, where oftentimes in college, at least this is my experience, of course, others may have different, but I would bond with one or two people in my classes, and then I would see them outside of the class, and we would talk about the class and discuss interesting things that we all enjoyed. And if there was a group project coming up, since we already knew each other, we would just sort of collaborate in that regard. I didn't really attend any parties with them. I don't participate much in the drinking culture or the nightlife much, and it didn't really dampen our sense of closeness in any way. You don't really need to follow the strict conventions of what a college social life is in order to find connections among people that you want to spend time with. So it didn't really feel too different to me or too hampering having such a different original schooling style.
You deviated a bit from the general culture of college, but we're still able to generally socialize like the person. That's really great.
Yes.
And what about you, Henry? What was your experience?
Yeah, I think I think college relationships or adult relationships more generally just require a level of intention to be able to make happen, right? Like you're not seeing people necessarily every day, or you're not seeing them in naturally social contexts, right? Like Sebastian, you're talking about classes, sometimes classes are social. More often than not, they're not though, right? And so it takes a little bit of work to make those things happen. And so I think in homeschooling, from a very young age, you have to be really intentional, right? And it takes a lot of work and be really motivated to make social interactions happen. And that's why I actually think like homeschoolers on average are actually far more socialized. They aren't necessarily doing as many social activities, right? But they're developing really key skills to be able to make social interactions happen, because everyone wants to be social, right? Everyone wants to be with other people and in community. And so I think when I, got to college, it took a lot more work to make relationships happen, right? And to have a social life. But I think I already had a lot of skills around being able to actually be able to organize others, right? Organize myself, right? And be able to have that motivation and that intentionality. And so I think that was huge for me and incredibly helpful.
That's really interesting. So homeschooling kind of gave you those social skills, even though it's not the classic social skills that people think of. It really helped you with adding others and forming those friendships.
Yeah.
Jessica, did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I found that my homeschooling experience really forced me to communicate with people of all ages and all levels of intelligence. And one thing I found very interesting in college is that the upperclassmen and the lowerclassmen really stuck together. And if you were in a class that was primarily juniors and seniors and you were a freshman, like it would be that awkward, like the freshmen's just sitting there by themselves, kind of silent and like really awkward, and feels the power dynamics. But something that I found is I was genuinely interested in everybody, because I was used to talking to, like the little 4-year-olds who are at the same program as me and the adults. So I did find that I tended to get along better with professors than a lot of my peers, simply because I think like Sebastian said, I wasn't interested in the drinking culture. I wasn't interested in the traditional party culture. So I did tend to spend a lot more time in the library or at coffee shops studying. So part of that was my own choice and just who I naturally gravitated towards. But the one thing I do regret is not joining social groups and like organizations sooner. So I do wish I had jumped into, like, our school has a huge dance program, and I wish I'd done that sooner or been willing to try some of like the non-academic or non-traditional like fun clubs and groups, because I think that would have been a really, really cool way to make connections with people with similar interests faster rather than having to seek them all out myself. But I did find incredible friendships, and honestly, a lot of them aren't even from my major. So I think that's kind of a myth or conception that you're just going to be best friends with your entire major or your entire dorm, because honestly, that's like first semester freshman year. And after that, every single friend group changes. And by senior year, you have like this mixed match friend group of like who knows where it came from, but like you're bonded for life and you all just have different interests and hobbies, but it works out somehow because like you guys said, it is adult relationships and they are intentional and there are shared interests and effort on both ends. So it's not the same as just your freshman high school clique.
This is all fascinating because it sounds like you guys are basically directly contrasting the view that homeschooling makes it really hard to socialize.
Yeah.
This is all amazing about the college experience.